Welcome to the Great Primeval Show. I am the Ark Minister and I am joined by Ancient Realms and Hodgepodge. It has been 16 years since our favourite show Primeval first aired. Today we'll be breaking down episode 1 of Primeval Series 1, also known as Leapin' Lizards in North America,
Die andere Seite
in Germany, and Anomalie in France. Written by Adrian Hodges and directed by Scylla Ware. We start off with the only pre-title sequence this series.
Taking place in 1998, this is the night Helen Cutter disappears after being attacked by a Gorgonopsid. We later find out that she had previously discovered the Forest of Dean anomaly and told no one. Following a fight with her husband and this attack, she left for years of travel through the anomalies. Note, this is the rucksack that she leaves in the forest, and presumably she had her camera with her. This was filmed at the Asda Superstore in Slough. Going into the actual creature itself, Gorgonopsids were a family of carnivorous synapsids from the Permian period. Formerly called mammal-like reptiles, they are now better known by the more fitting common name of stem mammals, as they are more closely related to mammals than reptiles. So no, it is not a dinosaur.
Look at the state of its room!
It was the dinosaur!
No, it's not a dinosaur.
Miss, there's a dinosaur in the playground!
It's not a dinosaur. Or you know what? Get him. Whilst only being referred to as a Gorgonopsid in the show, it is most likely the genus Inostrancevia due to living alongside Scutosaurus in Russia. Regardless of what genus it belongs to, it is much larger than any known Gorgonopsids and is the first of many examples of creatures in the show being oversized. It appears to have bumpy, almost armoured skin, whereas many stem mammals may have had fur. This was most likely done to make it look scarier and more dinosaur-like. They probably would have also had lips, but the saber teeth may have still been visible. It is worth noting that many of the creatures in the show also appeared in Impossible Pictures' other productions, and this is one of them. A Gorgonopsid also appeared in Walking with Monsters, referred to as Gorgonops in the companion book The Ultimate Guide to Prehistoric Life.
Here we have one of the greatest title sequences ever. It's a 2D interpretation of an anomaly, with shards spiralling in the background, and photos of the cast and clips of various creatures sweeping by each other. The shards momentarily join together to form a full image, just like an anomaly that forms together to join two places in space and time. The shards with the cast images are all screenshots from this episode, as follows. The exception is Julia Aubrey, who plays Helen Cutter, whose screenshot was from episode 4, suggesting a distance between her and her husband and the other characters, since she's been in the past for so long, away from everyone else. Also, Mark Wakeling is uncredited. The shards with the creature clips are the Mosasaur from episode 3, the Coelurosaurus flock from episode 1, the Dodo and Parasite X-ray from episode 4, the Pteranodon from episode 5, and finally the Gorgonopsid from episode 1. Note that the future predator, one of Primeval's most famous creatures, doesn't appear, saving its reveal for the final episode of the series. Now if you watch closely, the text for the cast names almost look as if they dissipate and reconstitute into the next actor, suggesting a connection between the characters. Another exception is Ben Miller, whose text is separate, likely reflecting the distance between his character and the others, as he mainly oversees the team from The Office, but his name becomes Primeval, which links all the characters together at the end. The font is either TW-Sen MT condensed or Futura SH medium. It's also been customized by the creators to create the broken letter look. Note that the title of the show is off-center, unlike almost every other show, suggesting the untamed nature and fluctuation of the timelines in this show, a concept touched upon in Series 1, but sadly dropped.
8 years later, we are now in 2006, specifically after the 17th of May, according to the Gorgonopsid photo in the newspaper article. And here we have the team's iconic silver Toyota Hilux, and we're introduced to our three main male leads here, Professor Nick Cutter, Stephen Hart, and Connor Temple. Now this guy must have tenure if he never bothers to turn up for work. Smilodon makes an early cameo among the many other fossils. The artwork in Cutter's office is by artist Zdenek Burian.
People claim to have seen the Loch Ness Monster. It doesn't mean to say it's there. Well, not now, obviously, because it died years ago. The government, they took the body away and they covered the whole thing up.
I have nothing, I just love this. Now this mystery is referring to the coelacanth group of fish that was thought to have gone extinct in the Cretaceous period, until a quote-unquote living fossil was discovered off the coast of South Africa in 1938. This helps foreshadow the appearance of subsequent creatures and explains where they come from, aka the anomalies. And here we link Helen and Nick Cutter as husband and wife, as the mention of the Forest of Dean piques our Lee's interest due to the history of her disappearance there and spurs them into action. The exterior of the university was filmed at the Toyota Great Britain head office in Epsom.
And we're introduced to Abby Maitland, lizard expert. Her lizards, Brad and Angelina, are Philippine sail fins. However, in the novelisation, they are tuataras. If you didn't guess, they are named after the, at the time, celebrity power couple Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. These lizards were both played by males, so Abby's joke about them being gay may have been an in-joke. Back to Abby, she is dropped from the zoo due to funding. Tim Parker offers a position at the bug house. More on this later. Note, Abby is not wearing the zoo's red shirt here, possibly a reason for her relieving. Seeing an exotic reptile, Abby also heads to the Forest of Dean. The Wellington Zoo was filmed at Whipsnade Zoo in Dunstable for this episode. Abby arrives at the Trent house in her Mini Cooper. In Ben's room, there's many dinosaur and prehistoric reptile toys, even a Terminator and Godzilla. Ben mistakenly identifies Rex as a Southeast Asian flying dragon. Given the similarities, it isn't a bad guess. As for the model itself, Rex is not really that representative of the genus Coelurosaurus. For starters, he is larger than the real animal. He is often called a lizard, but Coelurosaurus was actually a Weigeltisaur, an ancient family of reptiles known only from the Permian. True lizards did not evolve until the Jurassic. Weigeltisaurids had very distinct wings, unlike those of gliding lizards. Rather than being supported by specialized ribs and being controlled by the rib muscles, they had bony rods supporting their wing membranes that were controlled by the abdominal muscles. It is speculated to have been capable of gliding, but not of powered flight. Rex appears to have gecko-like foot pads, whereas it is unknown if Weigeltisaurids had these features. Coelurosaurus had a bony, heart-shaped frill at the rear of the skull, similar to those of ceratopsian dinosaurs, not a flexible membranous head crest. Rex is also shown to eat plant matter, whereas the real animal was thought to be insectivorous. Rex is shown to be highly intelligent for a reptile and to show emotional bonding to the human companions he later becomes involved with. He also acts much like a puppy or a playful cat. This was intentional, as many of Rex's movements were based on one of the animator's pet cats. His sounds were made from those of raccoons and frogs. Coelurosaurus was also not a contemporary of Scutosaurus or Inostrancevia, as it was native to Madagascar, not Russia, but of course maybe a flock of them travelled through an anomaly to the Permian Hills. There was a related genus of Weigeltisauria discovered in Russia, named in 2006, called Rortiania, so maybe this is what these animals are actually meant to be. Well, whatever Rex is, we all love him. Except Caroline. Abby and Ben head into the forest. Abby brings up private zoos, a seeming recurring gag for explaining the creatures. They find a cow in a tree. The enormous Gorgonopsid must have reached up and placed it there, so just imagine them doing the same with their prey Scutosaurus back in the Permian.
Surely you're not giving this whole monster story any credibility, Professor.
Just trying to keep an open mind.
Now earlier, the Professor immediately dismissed Connor's suggestion of monsters, but is happy to entertain the notion with an attractive female, I guess. When you have an 8-year dry spell, you tend to think with your little cutter.
I suppose I owe it to the taxpayer to do more than sit in my room and suck the minibar dry.
Proof the government is totally incompetent? And Claudia Brown joins the team. Connor would have been 14 in 1997. His database uses images from the Walking With documentaries as follows: Tarbosaurus, Scutosaurus, Patinosaurus, Entelodon, Pteranodon, Hynerpeton, Euparkeria, Postosuchus, Thrinaxodon, Protoceratops, Meganeura, Enuignathus, Ichthyosaurus, Smilodon, Coolosuchus, and Tylosaurus, amongst other creatures. Whew.
It's impressive. It's pretty cool, huh? And slightly sad.
F*** off, Stephen. You're a paleontology lab tech. This is literally your job to catalogue this stuff.
Here we have our first look at an anomaly. I love just how understated it is. No fanfare, it just is. A force of nature. Now, creators Tim Haynes and Adrian Hodges described the anomalies as quote-unquote shimmering in the air, and it was Framestore that designed the glass-like explosion of these rips in time, with the sounds somewhat being similar to Prehistoric Park's time portal. And here, just like any adolescent boy, Ben can't help but stick his head in any hole he can find. Jokes aside, this is a cool use of the anomalies, something they never do again, which probably would have come in handy for some of the situations. The Gorgonopsid follows Ben's blood trail and attacks Ben in his room. Ben embraces his dark side with Darth Vader's lightsaber, the first of many Star Wars references in Series 1.
Abby and Rex discover a Scootosaurus and meet up with the team.
Stay in his field of vision. You're making him nervous.
Not even 1 minute and Abby's already proven her worth on the team. As for the actual animal, unsurprisingly, it is much larger than the real animal, and is reconstructed as quite elephant-like with columnar legs, whereas the real animal is thought to have had a more sprawling gait. It is called both a dinosaur and an anapsid, neither of which are correct. It was a pariasaur, a group of extinct early branching reptiles known only from the Permian, once thought to be closely related to turtles. The head is also not quite the right shape. The name pariasaur means cheek reptile for the huge downward projecting cheekbones which the Primeval model does have, but they point further back and form a sort of frill around the back of the head. It's very strange. We also see them moving in herds, but it is unknown whether the real animals would have done this. Scootosaurus was also in Walking with Monsters, the model of which can even be seen in Connor's database.
Ben's mother seems convinced that her son is the sole culprit of destroying half his room, including ripping out the windows. It's also a miracle that she didn't hear the giant creature attacking him,
I blame the telly.
possibly referencing previous shows Tim Haynes has worked on, including Walking With. Cutter theorizes that
These animals have to be coming from somewhere.
it's interesting to think about what's going through his mind at this point, before he discovers the anomaly phenomenon. Possibly thinking about what Helen was theorizing before she disappeared, which we'll learn about in future episodes. Now, this scene of the team chasing the Scootosaurus was the very first scene filmed of Primeval, scored brilliantly by Dominic Scherer. The anomaly now appears more opaque in the darkness. The Home Office takes over the anomaly operation, a difference to other shows like Torchwood, with the government organising the team, rather than being a gang single-handedly dealing with the threats. Here, Connor loses his pen and house key to the anomaly's magnetism, and yet he somehow manages to get his pen back without going through the anomaly, and his missing key may be a setup for later housing arrangements. Cutter, meanwhile, is naturally thinking about Helen, and we get some hints to Stephen's relationship with Helen here as well, where he sounds almost bitter, refusing to believe she'd stay away if she was still alive.
We meet Lester, our final main character for this series. Instantly, you can see his haughtiness and self-pride with the deliveries of his line and how apparently unbothered he is by the whole affair. He neither confirms nor denies that he's dealt with aliens before. As Stephen tracks Connor's alongside not helping and complains about his allergies, an affliction which doesn't ever affect him again. The two big personalities of Cutter and Lester clash. While Lester holds all the power, Cutter is still able to undermine him with his brash Scottishness.
It's not every day you meet a potential girlfriend.
Much like his allergies, this quote-unquote pen pal is never brought up again after this episode.
And find a dinosaur.
It's not a dinosaur! Sorry, carry on.
Yep, moving on. Rex flies us around and gives us a tour of the Home Office, terrifying numerous people. As Claudia and Abby give chase, Lester and Cutter teleport back upstairs to the office. Abby either has lizard treats in her pocket, or it's chocolate. DNA tests on Rex were incredibly fast. and typical government avoiding any responsibility. The Home Office interior was filmed at Victoria House in London, and the exterior were office buildings on the bank of the Thames near Tower Bridge.
Connor IDs the creature from earlier as a Scutosaurus, but the footprint as belonging to a Gorgonopsid by using his database, featuring an incredibly accurate-to-life photo of one. He continues to not help Stephen by telling him he has to find the creature. Ben is stuck in detention with his teacher, the same actress who played a very similar character, Mrs. Templeman, in M.I. High. The Gorgonopsid passes by the window, viewed by Ben but not his teacher. The next shot cuts to the Gorgonopsid entering through the corridor leading up to the classroom, and passes by a display of a Stegosaurus, which overrides its instincts to kill for a split second as its pupils dilate for the sexy female dinosaur. It's not a... oh wait, yes it is. The teacher and Ben are trapped within the classroom as the Gorgonopsid attempts to break in before Stephen arrives to save the day. After a brief chase and battle with a fire extinguisher, Stephen somehow survives a head-on collision with the Gorgonopsid through metal doors, and he gets knocked out as the Gorgonopsid seemingly forgets about eating and runs away.
This is the introductory scene for Captain Tom Ryan, who is a recurring character throughout all of Series 1. He's brought in to protect the team, a proto-Becker, if you will. Claudia instructs Ryan to bring Cutter back at all costs and mentions contacting them over the radio, but it didn't work. This is possibly a reference to the anomalies causing radio interference, which is discovered in Series 2. Cutter and Ryan, along with Rex, head towards the anomaly. The music helps illustrate how mysterious and potentially dangerous this move is. The shot of the anomaly before them is pretty foreboding. Despite this, Cutter has an almost smirk-like smile on his face, showing that he's excited and keen to see what's on the other side. Cutter takes one last look back at Claudia and smiles, which shows that they have already formed an emotional attachment to one another. Cutter's reaction is a mixture of shock and possibly happiness as he and Ryan enter the past. A similar reaction to how any of us would probably be feeling. This place looks familiar. The late Permian Hills were filmed in La Palma, one of the Canary Islands. This location has been used in several of Impossible Pictures' productions, including Chased by Dinosaurs, Dragons A Fantasy Made Real, and Walking with Monsters. The hills may be close to the Siberian Traps, a large igneous province that erupted at the end of the Permian that led to the biggest mass extinction ever known. From what I can tell, Scutosaurus would have lived in more of a sandy environment than a volcanic ash field, but regardless, it's an awesome location. Connor drops his pen again, but this time it doesn't get pulled through, showing that the anomaly's magnetic field is getting weaker. I really like how we see herds of Scutosaurus just naturally living in the wild. Now, in promos from this scene, we see a volcano in the background. This was previously used in the episode Dino Birds of Prehistoric Park. Ryan finds a ruined campsite. Spoilers if you haven't seen the show, due to a loop timeline, this is the ruins of their future expedition in episode 6, when they were trying to find a future anomaly with futuristic bats called future predators. We see Cutter looking at a chocolate bar, which he later double checks in episode 6. We also see the creature crate lid next to skeletal Ryan, who is sadly killed and buried in episode 6. Now, at the end of that episode, we see some baby future predators loose in the Permian, which begs the question, are they adults now? Did they return home through the future anomaly, or still wreaking havoc on the Permian wildlife? Well, the Scutosaurus herd and Tellurosauravus flocks seem happy. We just don't know.
Cutter is knocked out by the man who's there to protect him. The music used here is in the form of a ticking clock to emphasize the concept of time running out. Cutter weighs up his options as he stares desperately into the fading anomaly, until he finally decides to come back to the future. Upon returning to the present, the anomaly closes, with Rex somehow sneaking back through unnoticed. The shots of the Gorgonopsid stalking in the night are so primal. You can almost feel sorry for it, as it probably only wanted to return home, but now has nothing left to lose. And here we get the first Wilhelm scream in the show, followed by many, many more. character falls whilst running away from danger cliché. The Gorgonopsid death stares Claudia as she falls, and her reaction is absolutely perfect in how frightened she looks. Stephen arrives to save the day, again. Note he smashes the Helix's windscreen, but is fixed in the next shot. The Gorgonopsid is knocked down, but soon gets back up with a chilling eye-open reveal. Carter tosses Stephen a gun to shoot down the reptile, and it dies a painful death. It's assumed that the body of it was taken back to the Home Office later on for study, and possibly dissection. The photos of Helen were taken by future Nick. We see 3 photos here. However, in episode 6 we only see 1 alternative photo taken. Cutter then hints how this is far from over, which is true, as we have about 48 episodes, 4 books, 5 webisodes, and 2 comics to go. Now Stephen and Connor are at the Home Office. Presumably they also signed the Official Secrets Act, as Connor mentions it in the next episode. The last scene of the episode shows Cutter alone in his lab. He then finds a living ammonite on his desk, intended as a calling card from Helen. I say living in quotes, as whilst there is clearly a living creature inside, the shell appears fossilized. We never find out what happened to this suffering creature. Using ammonites as calling cards is a brilliant idea, as in real-life paleontology, ammonite species are so plentiful that they are used as index fossils to determine specific geological dates. Helen also later leaves an ammonite fossil on Stephen's grave in Series 2, Episode 7. Upon realizing how it got there, Carter sprints out to the room to see Helen standing in the dim light of a street lamp, before disappearing into the night.
At the end and start of every episode of Series 1, we get a Next Time Previously segment of the next/previous episode, featuring various clips and voice lines that spark intrigue without giving away important plot details or reminding us what's happening from the previous one. These use the same text and graphics as those seen in Prehistoric Park. Now I'll mention this here and never again. Every time we hear these generic music tracks in Series 1, they are changed from the original broadcast, which uses pop music. These were changed on the DVD for licensing costs. You can see a list of music used on the Primeval wiki. And for some reason, in the original UK broadcast, they didn't use the Primeval theme for the end credits. They used Allsparks by the editors. In closing, episode 1 takes place over 3 full days, and it's approximately a day to a week between this episode and the next one. So join us next time for the episode 2 of Primeval Series 1 breakdown.
I'm about to defecate. Poo, 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 poo.